If you feel comfortable, we would invite you to introduce yourself to the group and tell us a little bit about your family. Can you discuss with a partner a favourite TV programme that you used to watch as a child? When you think back to your childhood, we must remember that for many people, their childhood has not held happy memories, and it can be a painful experience. The information we share today might cause some triggers from your own childhood. We encourage you to talk to a safe adult if you've been affected by anything in the presentation today. Please read our frequently asked questions and take a copy of some useful adult helpline numbers to offer you support if required. The definition of ACEs are stressful experiences that occur during childhood that directly harm a child, for example, sexual or physical abuse, or they affect the environment in which they live in, for example, growing up in a house with domestic violence. Professor Bellis, who works for Public Health Wales in Bangor University, in 2016 decided to create a Welsh study around the impact of ACEs in adults in Wales. Please click on the link below to play the ACE animation.
My parents don't understand. All the drinking and fighting means I'm scared. I'd like a cuddle, perhaps a bedtime story, but mostly I'd like them to stop shouting at me. And sometimes they hit me. Feeling scared every day and not feeling loved or wanted will change me for the rest of my life. Later, I'll have problems with school, problems with alcohol, and I'll get in trouble with the police. What's happening to me right now means I'm more likely to have serious health problems in middle age and die sooner than I should. Doctors say my life is full of adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. But in my world, this means I see my dad hitting my mum. Dad's got a drinking problem, and mum's always crying, even with the tablet. I'm always being shouted at and hit. After the booze and fags, there's not a lot of money for toys or clothes, or even food. I'm getting used to being scared all the time, but now I'm just angry. Doctors say things are changing inside me. My brain isn't learning how to control my feelings properly. My body can't relax like those kids who don't have ACEs, so my body won't be able to repair itself properly when I get older, making it more likely I'll get cancer or heart disease as an adult. It hurts when my parents hit me, but the real damage is hidden, and that damage will be with me for life.
I drink and smoke. They say I'm out of control, but I'm not. It's just my way of coping with my ACEs. I've been in plenty of fights, but what's wrong with that? Kids' punches don't hit half as much as when my dad hits me. I beat up a kid last week at school because he looked at me weird. Who cares? I ended up with more time out of school. Learning's not for me anyway, and the teachers don't care any more than my parents. I don't like the way anyone looks at me except my girl. She's 16 and pregnant, just like my mum was with me.
So this is where I've ended up. I've got diabetes and cancer is probably on the way. I know these kill you, but I couldn't do without them. I've never had a proper job and I've spent time inside. I hit my kids. I hit their mum too, until she left. So my kids have grown up with ACEs. And now my daughter had her first kid. She's 16. The course of my life was set in the wrong direction a long time ago. I know where I'm heading, and sadly I know where my kids are heading too. This doesn't have to happen. A little help in childhood makes a big difference to where life takes you. When I was a baby, the nurses noticed that my mum wasn't coping and helped her and explained how important my childhood is to the rest of my life. So, with a bit of help, she coped. The police came round after next door complained about the noise from Mum and Dad fighting. They asked how I was feeling. I told them I was scared all the time. Mum and Dad got help, the shouting got better and the hitting stopped. I even got some bedtime stories. I still had problems at school, but the teacher asked me about what was happening at home. I got help controlling my feelings. It wasn't a lot, but it was enough. I'm now married with 2 children and I've got a job. Most of the time. I haven't repeated the same problems with my kids. We got help when being a parent got too much. Our children are ACE-free, and that means their kids stand a good chance of growing up ACE-free as well. Almost half the people in England and Wales experienced 1 ACE as a child, and 1 in 10 of us suffered 4 or more ACEs. If we stop ACEs, millions of children would not become smokers or binge drinkers, and levels of violence in adults would be cut in half. Fewer ACEs in childhood also means fewer adults developing diseases like cancer, heart disease, and diabetes in middle age. We all need to be ACE aware. Are you? Doctors, police, nurses, teachers, firefighters, and most importantly, parents. The more you know about ACEs, the more you can help stop children growing up with ACEs in their lives. And for those of you who have already suffered ACEs, the more you know, the more you can help yourself and others who have suffered ACEs cope.
The jigsaw pieces. The United Nations Convention of the Rights of the Child states that all children have a right to their voice being heard. They all have the right to be protected from violence, abuse, or neglect when being brought up. Wales is the only country that has a Wellbeing Act to encourage us to work together to make our country a safer, more equal place to live for our children. If you imagine walking through a safe, familiar park on a bright sunny day, you will feel relaxed and stress-free. If suddenly you are faced with danger and a bear approaches you from behind the trees, your body will release a stress chemical called cortisol, which will enter your bloodstream and put you into a heightened state of alert. This release of cortisol will cause some changes in the body: faster heart rate, shaking, butterflies in the stomach, redness in the face or tightening of the neck area. This stress chemical enables us to survive in a dangerous world. It speeds up our reflexes, pumps the blood around the body faster, and allows us to make quick life or death changing decisions. We are now going to discuss 3 types of stress that can occur in people's lives. It is helpful to think of them as a traffic light system: green to amber to red. Red is always seen as a danger symbol in the world. We all experience positive and tolerable stress in our lives, but we usually have positive role models to support us through these times, giving us messages of support and compassion. We call this emotional buffering. Toxic stress, however, is intense, repeated, stressful events that go on over long periods of time without the buffering of a supportive adult. The adult is there in body, but not in mind, to respond to the young person in distress. Examples of positive stress: short bursts of cortisol enter your bloodstream the morning before an exam, your driving test, or maybe a job interview, or just before a competition of a race. It is short, it does not last long. It is vital for healthy development, and it helps us to achieve our aims and ambitions. Tolerable stress is more severe. It lasts longer, even up to a year. They are big life-changing events that we get through almost on automatic pilot. For example, bereavement in a family, somebody close being diagnosed with a serious illness like cancer, maybe redundancy causing economic difficulties, or even divorce. Toxic stress examples would be living in a home with domestic violence. The whole family learn to live with this for many years, and they cover up and carry on. Emotional buffering is absent as everybody is just trying to keep their heads above water. If we look at trauma and brain development, and we're going to look at the trauma response and the impact on children's brains. For example, if we look at the continuum, a healthy response is you're now at rest. If there was suddenly a perceived threat with a large, loud noise or an explosion in the street outside, suddenly you would feel threatened. A chemical called cortisol, which we discussed earlier in the bear slide, would flood into your bloodstream, a clever chemical designed to help you to survive. This would take your body into a fight, flight, or freeze response with heightened awareness of the sensations in your body. After this cortisol has flooded into your bloodstream, there would be a period of exhaustion and recovery, and then you would revert to the bottom of the continuum where you would then be at rest and your body would go back to its normal self. If we think about children that have experienced adversity, sometimes if this adversity has gone on for many, many years without the buffering of supported adults, children's brains start to adapt to the unsafe environment and they become fixed in what we call an allostatic load. Their body has learned to go into a fight, flight, or freeze response so quickly and so regularly that very soon this becomes a strengthened pathway in the brain. This becomes an area that the brain automatically takes their body into without them realizing. Children can become fixed in a fight, flight, or freeze response if they've experienced trauma. And we now know that toxic stress from trauma overdevelops that life-preserving part of the brain, that survival element of the brain that allows us to keep ourselves safe in times of danger.
The reality is that we all need a certain amount of stress, a certain amount of anxiety to perform well. If we don't care about that exam that we're going to have tomorrow, we'll probably fail. If we're going to cross the street and a truck is coming at us, we have release of adrenaline. We have release of a hormone that we call cortisol. We want to jump out of there, and adrenaline and cortisol are going to help us do that. So there's that good amount of stress. But if all day long you're feeling like a truck is coming at you, day after day after day, that's going to take a toll on the body.
So the kid next to them hits them, or the teacher reprimands them in a way that they're uncomfortable with, right? Literally what they're feeling, that activation is like there was a truck coming at them.
ACEs are known to have direct and immediate effects on a child's health. ACEs cause physiological changes. The wear and tear that allostatic load leaves increases the risk of premature ill health, such as cancer, heart disease, and mental illness. This can result in individuals whose systems are locked into a higher state of alertness, permanently prepared for further trauma. The impact of chronic stress experienced by a mother can have an impact even before birth. Domestic violence and abuse during pregnancy raises the cortisol stress levels in both mum and baby. We know the critical early years make a huge difference. The first 2 years of life, the baby's brain is growing from 1/4 of its size to 80% of its adult size. It is vital to develop a secure attachment in this early stage to your baby. And this can be done by spending quality time, talking, playing games, and providing a safe, nurturing environment. The video is going to explain how experiences in the first years of our lives affect how our brains form. Science tells us that the stress of abuse or neglect can damage the basic structures of a child's developing brain. Without the right help, it can put them at a risk of lifetime of health problems, developmental issues, and addiction. It's up to us to make sure that children overcome these stresses and have the nurturing experiences that they're going to need for positive development.
tells us that the experiences we have in the first years of our lives actually affect the physical architecture of the developing brain. This means that brains aren't just born, they're also built over time based on our experiences. Just as a house needs a sturdy foundation to support the walls and roof, a brain needs a good base to support all future development. Positive interactions between young children and their caregivers literally build the architecture of the developing brain. Building a sturdy foundation in the earliest years provides a good base for a lifetime of good mental function and better overall health. So just how is a solid brain foundation built and maintained in a developing child? One way is through what brain experts call serve and return interactions. Imagine a tennis match between a caregiver and a child, but instead of hitting a ball back and forth across a net, various forms of communication pass between the two. From eye contact to touch, from singing to simple games like peekaboo. These interactions, repeated throughout a young person's developing years, are the bricks that build a healthy foundation for all future development. But another kind of childhood experience shapes brain development too, and that's stress. Good kinds of stress, like meeting new people or studying for a test, are healthy for development because they prepare kids to cope with future challenges. Another kind of stress, called toxic stress, is bad for brain development. If a child is exposed to serious, ongoing hardships like abuse and neglect, and he has no other caregiver in his life to provide support, the basic structures of his developing brain may be damaged. Without a sturdy foundation to properly support future development, he is at risk for a lifetime of health problems, development issues, even addiction. It's possible to fix some of the damage of toxic stress later on, but it's easier, more effective, and less expensive to build solid brain architecture in the first place. One of the things that sturdy brain architecture supports is the development of basic emotional and social skills, an important group of skills which scientists call executive function and self-regulation can be thought of like air traffic control in the child's mental airspace. Think of a young child's brain as the control tower at a busy airport. All those planes landing and taking off and all of the support systems on the ground simultaneously demand the controller's attention to avoid a crash. It's the same with a young child learning to pay attention, plan ahead and remember, and follow lots of rules. Like all of us, kids have to react to things happening in the world around them, while also dealing with worries, temptations, and obligations on their minds. As these demands for attention pile up, air traffic control helps a child regulate the flow of information, prioritize tasks, and above all, find ways to manage stress and avoid mental collisions along the way. Having this ability is a necessity for positive and level mental health. Developing effective air traffic control, overcoming toxic stress, and building solid brain architecture are things kids can't do on their own. And since strong societies are made up of healthy, contributing individuals, it's up to us as a community to make sure all young people have the kinds of nurturing experiences they need for positive development. To build better futures, we need to build better brains.
There is a close relationship between ACEs and what happens within a family and the context in which these happen in adverse community environments. Living in adverse community environments can often increase the impact of ACEs on families and individuals. The leaves on the tree represent the symptom of ACEs that we see. If the tree is planted in poorer soil with a lack of affordable housing, community violence and poverty, and a lack of job opportunities, the leaves on the tree will wither. If we look at how many adults have been exposed to each ACE from the Welsh study, we notice that in the 3 maltreatment boxes, 23% of adults had experienced verbal abuse as a child. 17% had experienced physical abuse and 1 in 10 had experienced sexual abuse. If we move to the childhood household factors, 20% had experienced a parental separation or divorce that could be classified as toxic. 16% had experienced domestic violence, mental illness of a parent, 14%, and 14% had a parent addicted to alcohol. 5% reported parents addicted to substances, and 5% had a parent incarcerated in prison during their childhood. We notice that 5% drug use is quite low in comparison to what some of our communities seem to be facing today. The reason for this can be explained by examining the ages of the people in the study. They were between 18 to 69 years of age, and the people in their 50s and 60s reported less incidences of parents taking substances. Many reported that their parents had been heavy drinkers, but they never witnessed drug use in the family. This is because the prevalence of drug use has increased over the years. There are now more substances easily available in our communities and within our families than we have ever seen before. If we look back, drugs have always been available, but they were certainly not as commonplace as we notice today. If we think about the prevalence of ACEs in Wales in our country, they are very common. For every 100 adults in Wales, 47 had suffered at least one ACE during their childhood. That is almost half of the Welsh population, and 14 had suffered 4 or more, which is 14% of the Welsh population. The dangers seem to occur with multiple ACEs. Many people seem to cope and manage with 1 or 2 ACEs if they have emotional support from positive relationships around them. But if these are lacking and multiple ACEs have been present in their early experiences, the risks certainly begin to rise. If we examine the first document, which looks at the increased risks for health harming behaviours in 2 groups of people, and we compare people without any ACEs to those that experience multiple ACEs, the group with multiple ACEs will be 4 times more likely to become a high-risk drinker, 6 times more likely to have had or caused an unintended teenage pregnancy, and 6 times more likely to become a smoker. Also, they will be 6 times more likely to have had sex under the age of 16, 11 times more likely to have smoked cannabis, 14 times more likely to have been a victim of violence, and 15 times more likely to have committed violence against another person in the last year. They are also 16 times more likely to have used crack cocaine or heroin, and 20 times more likely to end up in prison at some point in their lifetime. We will now look at the link between ACEs and an adult's mental well-being. Again, if we compare people over the past week without ACEs to those who have suffered 4 or more, we notice that the group with multiple ACEs are 3 times more likely to have never or rarely felt relaxed, 3 times more likely to have never or rarely felt close to people, 4 times more likely to never be able to think clearly, and 5 times more likely to have never or rarely dealt with their problems well and to be able to make up their minds about the future. They will be 6 times more likely to have never or rarely felt a sense of optimism about their future plans, and 6 times more likely to have never or rarely felt useful. These are very sad statistics for us to think about why we have so many families who are struggling to make decisions and choices for their future. We will now explore the link between ACEs and the impact on our national health system. At the age of 69, those with 4 or more ACEs double their chances of being diagnosed with a chronic disease than adults without the experiences of ACEs. The specific diseases that the risks increased for were diabetes type 2 by 4 times and ischemic heart disease and pulmonary disease by 3 times. Levels of health service use were much higher in adults who had experienced ACEs. Over a 12-month period, if we compare people without ACEs to those with 4 or more, the group with ACEs were 2 more likely to visit their GP and 3 times more likely to attend accident and emergency or have an overnight stay in the local hospital. We know that people's behaviour is their way of communicating. Children who experience trauma find it really difficult to communicate their true emotions or feelings. They're able sometimes to tell you when they're feeling happy or sad. They may be able to describe anger, but the really complex emotions that they will experience, such as guilt, shame, and a sense of loss, are not as easy to explain. Sometimes they simply do not have the language to express themselves. We know that there can be triggers which sometimes cannot be seen. Some children can be triggered by certain smells, raised voices, and loud noises. We know that life for this child can be incredibly confusing. And instead of us blaming the child for displaying extreme behaviours which can be challenging in the classroom, we need to revert to asking ourselves what is driving the behaviours. If we are truly going to become trauma-informed in our responses, we can change our thinking from not what is wrong with you, but what has happened to you. Let us look at all the experiences that you have lived through which have shaped your behaviours today. We know that children who have experienced trauma are extremely shaken up. How do we relieve the pressure safely? Look at the Coca-Cola bottle and imagine it has been shook up enough times before a child leaves the house or on the way to school. The teacher can ask a simple question and the child will explode with pent-up anger and frustration and sometimes behave in an extreme manner. We have to remember a gradual release of the bottle top. A gentle, calm approach works best when cortisol levels are running high. The brain can be described simply as being in three parts. The brainstem connects to the most primitive reptilian area, which enables us to survive. We will flight, fight, or freeze if our emotions are triggered and we feel threatened or scared. The mammalian area lies above the reptilian section, which allows us to have feelings which could be frustration, pleasure, anger, hurt. The cerebral cortex is the highest section over the top, which allows us to think, make rational decisions, and problem solve. This is the last area to be fully formed, and it can take up to the age of 21. When we feel scared, frightened, or threatened, our emotions trigger us to release cortisol, and the survival area is now in full control. When we are in this state, we cannot access the thinking part of the brain, and we will flip our lids. Please click on the link below to watch Dan Siegel explain the brain model in more depth. If we draw our attention to the visual image of the iceberg, we notice that 2/3 is below the surface of the water. If a child has experienced all of these difficulties, they might display some of the behaviours above the iceberg. Every child reacts in a variety of ways. There is not a one-size-fits-all model when we look at experiences and impact of trauma. Preventing, tackling, and mitigating ACEs. ACEs can last a lifetime, but they don't have to. Healing can occur. Safe, stable, nurturing relationships and other protective factors are the key to healing. The cycle can be broken. We know in the ACE Hub Wales that breaking the cycle can be incredibly difficult. There are protective factors that help to build up the blocks of resilience. The keys are one or more stable, caring, child-adult relationship, which can make a huge difference to people. People need to feel they can overcome their own hardship and guide their own destiny, rather than just be told that they must do better. They can be guided by trusted people, but they need to make those decisions for themselves. They need to feel involved and connected in their local communities and be equipped to manage their behaviours and emotions, to recognise when their bodily responses are changing due to increased cortisol levels and have some strategies in their bags that work for them instead of losing control. This is not about counting ACE scores. It is vital we look at the whole picture of a person's life. How many protective factors can they access? What is missing from the jigsaw pieces? Famous footballer and celebrity Ian Wright discusses in his autobiography the importance of having a trusted child-adult relationship with his teacher and football coach, Mr. Pigden. He puts his success today down to the relationship saving him during a very troubled childhood. He experienced multiple ACEs as a child. His mum had a drinking problem and his dad left the family when they were very young. The family were economically disadvantaged too. Ian was going down a difficult path in secondary school and was regularly fighting or flighting. His teacher, Mr. Pigden, never gave up on him, just took the time to nurture, support and guide him. He gave him alternative choices and never wrote him off. And his success today is down to this one trusted adult relationship. It just goes to show what a difference one human being can make to another person's life.
Ian's still the highest scoring striker ever to play for Arsenal, and he owes a lot to the man who first taught him to kick a ball, his old school teacher, Sid Pigden.
As I haven't seen him for, 23, 24 years, and so he would now be expecting me to be 6 feet under, I would think. I don't actually think, he probably won't recognise me because he won't believe it's me. Hello, Ian. Long time no see.
Mr. Pigden, you're alive.
I'm alive, he says. How are you doing?
I can't believe it. Someone said you was dead.
As you see, I'm very much in, and I'm so glad you've done so well with yourself.
He was so supportive all the time. he kind of like had me as his kind of like special guy. I don't know what to say.
Oh,
God, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. You know, now I realise how important he was in my life. The first main imposing figure, male figure in my life who was trying to guide me on the right road.
how far are we going back now? 40 years, 30 years anyway.
Easy, 32 years.
Yeah.
Our messages around understanding of ACEs and early trauma is clear. It is not what's wrong with people and blaming them, but it's about taking the time to understand what has happened to them and their early life experiences, which might have shaped who they are today. We now need more than ever as a nation to show more kindness, compassion and understanding to the people that we meet along the way. We need to support each other, be a safe adult for others to talk to, and develop resilience to keep going when times get really tough. Just click on the button below to play the ACE Hub Wales campaign video. It's time to be kind.
Jack. You alright?
What?
Hey, Tom's outside. Why didn't you come round to ask for food? We haven't seen you in a while.
Okay.
Great. Hey, well, Tom, he's been football today.
Behind the child, there might be a struggle you can't see. A small act of kindness could change someone's life.
Please take the time to read the passage in the slide and press the link below for more information about the Book of Strength. This book introduces the idea that our mental health and resilience are determined by what has happened to us. Children should not be left to carry these burdens into their adult lives. You can download a copy of the PDF version of the Cobble story, The Book of Strength.